Reading from its Steam store page, Cruelty Squad is a tactical first-person shooter set in the hardcore gig economy of corporate liquidations. You're an emotionally dead, combat substance-fueled grunt of Cruelty Squad, a depraved subsidiary company tasked with performing wet works for its host conglomerate. Will you make the corporate archdemoness proud, or succumb to bitter tears of failure? Now, from that initial blurb, you might think you've garnered just a hint of what to expect from Cruelty Squad. A smattering of Syndicate here, a dash of immersive sim there, but the reality is much stranger. The visuals of Cruelty Squad are probably the first thing you'll zero in on here. They're certainly an acquired taste, a clashing of color and texture that feels like something approaching a custom Winamp skin as filtered through a nightmare version of Windows 95. It's probably one of the biggest hurdles that a lot of people will need to overcome when it comes to acclimatizing to Cruelty Squad, but even then, the aesthetic here isn't total visual anarchy. There's just enough visual grounding to convey what a space is supposed to be, albeit occasionally vomited upon by a kaleidoscope, or at least something resembling last night's curry takeaway. Nonetheless, it's a kind of visual logic that begins to settle somewhere between the folds in your brain, and shockingly enough, becomes something approaching normal as you fumble your way through its opening batch of missions. As for exactly what kind of missions you'll be undertaking at the behest of your disturbingly swollen handler, the order of the day is assassination, by any means necessary. Before you rush off with murder on your mind, however, it'll be worth getting to grips with some of the more unorthodox quirks of the Cruelty Squad control layout. Probably the biggest one you'll need to wrap your head around is reloading, which here isn't a simple case of hitting the requisite key, but instead achieved by holding down mouse 2, dragging downwards, and then releasing after the required point, mimicking the action of unloading and reloading a magazine. Thankfully, that's about as quirky as it gets. As for the rest of it, you've got the more standard lean, kick, picking up and throwing mechanics, and when it comes to familiarization, Cruelty Squad HQ itself has you covered with a shooting range and combat course, helping you shake off the rust and refine your technique before truly getting down to business. As for the rest of Cruelty Squad HQ, I'd say try not to think too hard about the oppressively positive vibe of everyone in the lounge area. After all, it is supposed to be an oasis of love and friendship. Also, pay no mind to the weird-looking door at the back. Its incomprehensible words
drilling into your mind, turning you away.
Anyways, your first gig lands you on the doorstep of pharmacokinetics. One of the employees here has been embezzling funds and blowing it all on biocurrency, not to mention flying into fits of rage, which involves vomiting blood all over the office. Also, there's Jerry. Fuck Jerry. Now, at first, you might be tempted to kick down the front door, make a beeline for your nearest target, helpfully displayed on your HUD, and get busy assassinating, but that's where you'll discover that the main lobby is typically where you'll find a high concentration of security, and what are commonly referred to as sludge mongrels. That's not to say that going in through the front isn't a viable choice. You could absolutely spend a fair chunk of your time blundering through the lobby, plinking away at everyone rushing your position, but as fresh meat, you'll discover that you don't quite have the funds yet to go loading yourself up with implants and armor, and your arsenal of weapons will largely still consist of the basics. So, if anything, this opening level encourages you to maybe scope out the less volatile methods of ingress. In that regard, there's certainly a fair few to be found. A ladder in the back streets, for example, will take you up to the rooftops, and from there you could smash your way through one of the upper windows, or you could play it a little bit more subtly, breaking in through the vents and then applying some efficiently silenced headshots to the much more minimal security between you and your somewhat misshapen mark. Let's not forget about Jerry, though. He's still got it coming, and he is in a conference room on another floor. So from here, you could trace your way back down to the lower lobby, clearing out the security as you go, or you could exit the way you came in, find a slightly longer but demonstrably sneakier route. In this regard, there's a locked-off side alley on the opposite side of the building, and busting your way in through here will allow you access through upper floor labs, a vent, and then ultimately the conference room itself. Surprise, Jerry! This, however, is not the end of the story. Just because you've taken out your targets doesn't mean you get to celebrate, because you've yet to exfil the level, and that needs to be done at a designated exit point. In the early stages of Cruelty Squad, this can often mean being just as careful on the way out as you were on the way in. That is, of course, unless you crave that adrenaline kick of leaving with guns blazing. But some food for thought would be the fact that Cruelty Squad has no mid-mission checkpoints or quick saving. Death here taking you all the way back to the start of the mission and slapping you with a body regeneration fee for the trouble. Also, there's this whole divine link thing. It's something I should probably talk about, but yeah, I heavily advise buckling up for this. In all honesty, it took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out the difficulty mechanic threaded throughout Cruelty Squad and what exactly the implications of it were. As standard, you start out with Divine Link. You get a shiny silver border, you take standard damage, but when you die, the link is severed, proclaiming you now as merely a flesh automaton powered by neurotransmitters, which, despite being a negative statement in the context of the game, it still manages to sound somewhat badass. This essentially busts you down a difficulty tier, replacing the border with a grungier hue, and it takes a fair bit more dying in this state to bust you down even further to Power in Misery tier, where you now traverse the grid of death. Again, strangely badass sounding. Regardless, this now essentially means you are playing on Babby mode for babbies. No regen fee, reduced damage taken, and should you feel the need, you can now recoup health mid-mission by feasting on the corpses of your enemies. Brutal. For the most part, I managed to truck along just fine for a fair while without actually sinking to what I call regenerating cannibal mode. The initial clutch of Cruelty Squad's levels actually proving to be quite forgiving provided you approach them with the correct kind of mindset. Key to success in that regard for me was always taking it at a steady pace, scoping out the surroundings, minding my sightlines, and never, ever trusting what's behind a door. Key to the fun here, however, is the fact that these missions are not simply one and done type deals. These missions are meant to be replayed, further incentivized not just by the fascinating alternate routes and secrets you might uncover, but also by rating on completion, which is driven by the efficiency of your kills and also slotted by the difficulty you achieved it with. Implants in that regard are certainly useful when it comes to shooting for those higher ratings, the right kind of loadout enabling you to circumvent, sneak, or flat out steamroll your way through certain missions. But at first, most will be out of your price range, forcing you to run with empty slots and experience missions from a more grounded and tactical perspective. As soon as that cash starts rolling in though, that's where you can start getting creative with your build. In total, you have 4 available slots: head, arms, chest, and legs. Sick of not being able to straight up vault fences or walls? Pneumatic legs are where it's at. Want to turn someone's severed head into a lethal projectile? Augmented arms are just the ticket. Want to turn the world into a Virtual Boy-infused visual hellscape? Well, say hello to the Nightmare Goggles, which, as an added bonus, smell terrible. Oh, this thing. Yeah. It was previously embedded in my arm. Naturally, some of the more genuinely useful implants are going to be much more expensive, and for good reason. The likes of the Appendix allows you to slap an external intestine to your arm that lets you swing and climb, getting around whole swathes of level with relative ease. Some of the higher grade armor sets can dramatically reduce damage, topping out with a biosuit that just envelops you in a thick, writhing mass of flesh. And then there's the Gunk Boosters, which give you a double jump courtesy of expelling disgusting snot out of your heels all over the floor. Yeah, fuck cyberpunk, that shit's passé. Say hello to biopunk, bitches, where all your power fantasies come true, but at the cost of transforming you into some kind of hideous, malformed freak. Intriguingly, some implants can't actually be purchased, instead requiring you to track them down in the wild, and this can often mean leveraging the explorative abilities granted to you via some of your previously purchased implants. This, in a fashion, also feeds into the system for expanding your selection of weaponry here in Cruelty Squad, which at first is actually pretty decent. The starting pistol is a fantastic initial weapon, laying out most standard grunts with a single precise shot to the head, and the starting SMG isn't too shabby either, but I have to admit, once I clapped my eyes on this particular weapon, it became a firm favorite. Firstly, it boasts super accurate burst fire with minimal recoil, and secondly, it's got pretty reasonable range. But last, and certainly not least, just look at it. If I'm not mistaken, this is modeled on the real-life G11, and it's basically what the architectural concept of brutalism would look like if it were a rifle. It is a beaut. But yes, in terms of acquisition, you don't buy guns here in Cruelty Squad. Rather, you steal them from your enemies and then take them home with you. Sounds simple, sure. Till you realize you only have 2 available weapon slots, and they need to be in at least one of them by mission's end to actually land back in your armory. Honestly, it all comes down to how badly you want to add a new gun to the collection. For example, I recall screwing up a fair few runs of Androgen Assault purely because I really wanted to take home a Bartoli-inspired flechette shotgun. There's also a few choice death dealers to be found in dark corners of other missions too. You've got rocket launchers, high caliber sniper rifles, and one of my favorites for sheer what the fuckery, a gun that scrambles DNA so hard it turns people into unresurrectable flesh lumps. That said, there's nothing stopping you from focusing purely on the mission at hand and taking a few mental notes for a future return. It all forms part of that baked-in replayability. It's not just about finding more efficient or stealthier routes. Sometimes it's about taking an extended stroll through the door dimension. Sometimes it's about discovering a warren of spooky catacombs hidden beneath suburb streets. Sometimes it's about seeing if you can just kill someone with a toilet. And sometimes it's about uncovering entire secret levels. Like that one time I blundered through a cruise ship wall, only to change tack entirely and murder my way through an alpine ski resort. This game is honestly so densely layered that you can't help but feel compelled to pick up a mission multiple times with alternate loadouts and just go spelunking for secrets. Paradise, for example, has that aforementioned warren of catacombs just stretching out beneath its streets. To reach it though, you need to get to this particular door. It only opens if you got a divine link. Oh, and I should probably mention the mutated flower creature you should have to kill before you actually get here. Anyway, divine link requires at least a divine orb if you're not in the appropriate status, which you can find at the start of the final mission in a secret backroom of Cruelty Squad that requires a resolution of 640 by 480, or by finishing any given mission on punishment mode. Oh, and you're gonna absolutely need a flashlight. Can't forget that one. You can pick one up at the start of Androgen Assault, but it takes up a weapon slot, so you're gonna need to bring at least one good weapon with you, at least good enough to deal with a man-turned inflatable castle. Don't get distracted by the tiny door now. And oh boy, there it goes. Oh jeez. Oh man. That's a lot of blood. Hold on, I just need to grab a bucket. My point is, there's no such thing as a standard playthrough of Cruelty Squad. Cruelty Squad is about as far as you can get from standard. Its entire conceit designed around making you dig deeper, scratching at the boundaries of this game's reality, and questioning what the ever-loving fuck is exactly going on here. Cruelty Squad's narrative is entwined within its world building, and its world building is built on secrets within secrets within secrets, all interlinked, and some of them just hiding right in plain sight. To say that Cruelty Squad is simply a tactical shooter with a strange aesthetic and cool level design would be ignoring the yawning abyss of unsettling weird that permeates this game to its very core. I could honestly go on all day about the minutiae of Cruelty Squad, and believe me, it's tempting, because so very much of Cruelty Squad is tied up in that minutiae, but seriously, going full dive on this game would only do a disservice to those of you out there already finding yourselves drawn in. A surface level run of Cruelty Squad will probably only net you about half the total experience of this game, if that. Essentially, a dry run for the real game that reveals itself further down the line. That's right. Fishing. This right here is the true endgame of Cruelty Squad. It's not about winding your way to a target using every tool at your disposal, going over a level with a fine-tooth comb just to see if you can unfurl the dark secrets of this world's reality. No, it's about winding your way to the nearest body of water, casting a line, and catching some weird-looking fish that you can show off back at the Cruelty Squad aquarium. If you're particularly savvy, you might even be able to play the fish market and bag yourself, I shit you not, a house, which I have yet to do. I mean, sure, fish is not the only avenue here in Cruelty Squad when it comes to making yourself filthy rich. There's also the organ harvesting market, which is absolutely a thing you can do, because it would just be wasteful to leave an eviscerated corpse lying around. After all, you could scoop up a bit of spare liver, some stomach. Coarse brain matter is always a good investment. I mean, seriously, you'd be surprised how much good money you can make on reasonable quality internal organs these days, even with the occasional bullet hole. But even then, for the more squeamish, there's the regular boring old stock market. I hear games is a worthwhile investment these days, but let's be real here. None of those can replicate the raw thrill of dangling your line in an irradiated body of water and pulling out whatever the fuck that is. I'll be honest, at this point I feel like I'm doing the raw moment-to-moment gameplay of Cruelty Squad somewhat of a disservice here. After all, it is the primary way that you'll be able to interface with all of the wonders of this twisted reality. The shooting is serviceable. I can't honestly say I've had much trouble when it comes to point gun pull trigger bang. Can't really say I've ever used the lean mechanic for more than just taking a peek around corners, however, because the accuracy on that front devolves into something reminiscent of what happens after happy hour at the tequila bar. But hey, at least it's not as bad as whatever the fuck happens when you have the misfortune to come face to face with a psyker. When it comes to the standard scenario of shooting something in the face, the AI, for the most part, is more than happy to stand still long enough for you to pop a few rounds directly into their noggins. Though, that said, not always the case. You'll certainly have a hard time landing a shot in an enemy when they go full headless chicken mode, and of course you've also got the presence of much more armored enemy types that don't go down without a fair amount of lead spitting. The likes of the shock troopers in the bubble armor certainly comes to mind. Necromechs certainly fit into the tanky category. And I'll be honest, if you're running a mission where you're running into decent quantities of those kinds of enemies, you're either going to have to start bringing along some fair decent amount of explosives or finding a way to avoid dealing with them. On that subject, I have found that Cruelty Squad can occasionally throw you a curveball when it comes to what you should expect from a level on multiple replays. Successive visits to this particular map, for example, Paradise, has occasionally seen me dealing with more limited visibility thanks to a foggy weather effect. Further to that, it's even seen fit to drop the occasional necromech at the back of the level, utterly surprising me and catching me off guard. So even when you feel like you've got a level entirely on lock, you should always prepare for the eventuality that it's going to throw you a curveball. But circling back, when it comes to the shooting, I can honestly take it or leave it. The shooting is honestly just a means to an end. The real meat and potatoes of the experience here lies within the level design and the world building and the exploration. Sure, it won't take you long to complete an initial run of Cruelty Squad, myself breezing through the main missions in under 8 hours, but even then, Cruelty Squad dedicates fair attention to making sure the mission-to-mission formula doesn't get stale. Sure, it still toes the line of go here and kill X, but just as you start to develop a routine in your approach, you'll find that the levels themselves start to sprinkle in a few little tweaks here and there. One of the more memorable for me was certainly the first time a level placed its exit somewhere different from the spawn point. Usually it's within eyeshot, but this time it wasn't, and completely threw me for a loop. And then there's the case of just novel mission setups. For example, one has you mistakenly targeted by an entire police force and having to escape your apartment and work your way around to killing your landlord. It just really forces you to think about the options available to you in a much more claustrophobic and intense situation. Though, regarding this particular level, it reminds me that there's one singular enemy here that eternally pisses me off. It's not exclusive to this mission, it does turn up in multiple, and it's notable for the fact that it inflicts a status known as Toxic Crisis. Yep, it's time for us to talk about flesh rats! Out of all the enemies in Cruelty Squad, even the psychers with the fat, stupid heads that make your vision go wobbly and then make you force fire your guns, flesh rats are the ones I hate the most. Flesh rats are typically ambush enemies, hiding around corners, falling from the ceiling, and if not that, sometimes in general too small to notice. For a flesh rat to inflict Toxic Crisis, it only has to nibble you once. Once inflicted, you basically end up in a poisoned state that inflicts twofold panic, because one, you need to make sure you've got enough health to weather the poison effect till it expires, And 2, you need to kill the flesh rat before it nibbles you again and continues the status. And guess what? That same status inflicts wobbly aim, so good goddamn luck landing an accurate shot. Now, I have been told that there is a way to remedy Toxic Crisis within the game, and that's great. It's just that I haven't personally tracked it down yet, and the status effect is just an absolute pisser to deal with. Can honestly kill a mission stone dead in its tracks sometimes, and oh hey, would you look at that, there's an entire mission that takes place in a poisonous swamp. Thank you, consumer soft products. Thank you for this bountiful supply of pain. Mercifully, the edge is taken off just a smidge thanks to the presence of berries that grow exclusively during the course of that map that can instantly flush your systems of Toxic Crisis, but as for every other instance of it, particularly involving flesh rats, damn son, damn. It's telling then that out of everything, that is probably my biggest bugbear with Cruelty Squad, and one that thankfully isn't an overwhelmingly constant occurrence. Oh sure, there's a fair degree of jank, don't get me wrong. Jank is practically coursing through the veins of Cruelty Squad, but honestly at this point, I'm willing to accept it as part and parcel of the overall aesthetic, and even then, Cruelty Squad is a game that transcends its inherent jank. I'm honestly surprised with just how much mileage I've gotten out of Cruelty Squad at this point. That surprise magnified by the fact that at first, I didn't even think this was going to be a game I would actually enjoy. Key to that change of mind is just how much stuff there is to do, how much there is to discover. I just honestly find it ingenious, for example, how Cruelty Squad converts what would be a fairly rote act in any other game, that being the collection of extra weapons and implants, into something that actively enriches and expands the game. You're not just checking off a list, you're unlocking new methods of traversal, ones that open up new corners of pre-existing levels. You're getting new methods of dealing with your enemies. You're uncovering entire tranches of level that you had no idea existed before, peeling back the layers of this twisted world and just seeing how far the rabbit hole goes. It's also the simple things that Cruelty Squad does that puts a big dumb grin on my face. The fact that you can ace a mission such as Sin Space Engineering with a well-timed jump and a sniper shot, the fact that you can yeet a toilet across an entire room to take out a target, and let's not forget the fact that the Grapendix can enable you to swing around raining death from above like some genetically deranged Tarzan. If anything, I feel bad not slapping out a 5-second video on this telling everyone to just drop whatever they're doing and go play Cruelty Squad, because the joy of Cruelty Squad is the joy of discovery. This will easily go down as one of the most interesting games I've played this year. It is a game possessed of a very particular vision, one writ large through its design, both visual, mechanical, and architectural, through its strange NPC interactions, down to the dark secrets festering away at its core. In summary, good shit. Anyway, I'm off to get a blood transfusion. This nosebleed ain't stopping anytime soon, and yeah, I gotta top myself up before I start shaking people by the shoulders asking if I can harvest their livers. Peace! Icarus out!